Welcome back to Beyond the Silence podcast, and I am your host, Lisa Toma. So, today I have such an incredible guest in general, but mostly for me. We have Josephine here, Josephine Carmela. I'll tell you a little bit about her in a second. But I brought her on just because of the transformation that she has led me with in my own personal journey. So I asked Josephine to just send me like a little bio. I know so much about her, but I wanted it to be, I kind of wanted to be able to piece it all together. And so she sent me her short bio. So I'm going to pull it up because it actually wasn't even that short, but it was pretty awesome. So, Josephine Carmela is an award-winning transformational feminine leadership mentor, and she is dedicated to empowering women to step into their authentic power and purpose. So she guides female entrepreneurs as well and leaders through personal growth, leadership breakthroughs, helping them embody their unique feminine strengths to create lasting impact and success. And I could not agree more. Josephine has brought me on this beautiful journey, which is a part of why I'm here today. So welcome, Josephine. I'm so honored to have you here because you know how much I love you. You know how much you've helped me and everything you've done for me. So thank you so much for coming here and being able to share all of your bio stuff, all of your bio stuff and your beautiful heart and wisdom.
Awesome.
So
Thank you so much. I love you just as much. And
Thank
I'm
you.
so excited to be here. And I'm really excited for our conversation. And I just have to say before we get started that I have just loved watching you blossom. I'm so proud of you. I loved watching you grow into your innate gifts and to just step into your purpose. It's been really beautiful. So
Thank
very
you.
honored.
And thank you for helping me get there.
Absolutely.
I
It's been
needed
my
I needed a
pleasure.
little I needed a little push. So I want to talk about just like a little bit how we met because I think that that's a really important part. So Josephine and I met on a retreat. I was actually on the verge of extreme burnout, and this retreat opportunity came up. It was like a 2 or 3 day retreat. Mind you, I've never been away from the kids at this point.
I
This was
remember
my
that.
very first retreat that I ever stayed a night without the kids. And they were very young. This was a couple years back, maybe 3.
Yeah.
And I went to this retreat. I wasn't even sure what to expect. I didn't know what I was going to, I just knew I needed to get away and I needed to take care of myself because I felt myself crumbling. And Josephine was there for herself, but you were also there to facilitate a class.
Right.
Now, being as humble as you are, you never brought up once what you did for a living. And I overheard you having a conversation with another woman there and hearing what kind of work that you do. And I immediately felt in my gut, I need to work with her. And I remember also that there was we were around the fire. I don't know if you remember this. And I said something.
I
I
do
was just
remember
like
this.
talking from my heart.
Yeah.
And then you looked at me and you're like, "Oh, my little, what did you call me?"
I said you're a poet.
"Yeah, you're my little poet." And I'm like, "How did you know that I used to write poems?" And you are the only one who saw that in me. I actually did used to write a lot. And then after my mom passed, I kind of lost that. But you were the only one who noticed that in me. So I felt really seen already by you.
Awesome.
And then at the end of the retreat, I kind of give you the heads up, like, just want to let you know I might reach out to you after the retreat. I go home and you're on this retreat and you're going home so full, and then you go back to reality. And I kind of continued where I left off. I felt a little bit more full and I reached out. We started working together. But I also feel like through that, a beautiful friendship blossomed, right?
Absolutely.
And
yes.
how lucky am I to be surrounded by, and to have as a friend and a mentor who filled me up with so much, I don't even know the word, like empowerment. Like that's the only word that I can use to describe the feeling that I had when I just had a coffee with you.
I have goosies. Oh my goodness. Yeah, thank you so much. Do you remember that conversation, that like 3 hour conversation at Hero Burgers?
Oh my
Do you
gosh,
remember?
yes, I do. That's when you were
Where,
helping me like get my thing together with like my
yeah,
coaching and stuff too.
yeah, because you were like, I gotta take this course, I gotta take this course, I gotta take this one. And
Oh yeah, I
I
remember that.
had this intuition that, yes, of course, you have to get certified. Absolutely. There's an integrity piece in that. But I felt that you were using that as a way to not step into your voice and step into your power.
Hmm.
And you were like, okay, I'm just gonna like wait and do this. And I was saying to you, you remember that you've got a gift and it needs to get out there and people need to experience you, right?
And you know what I just realized too? I felt like I already had so many certifications. I
Exactly.
knew what I was doing. But that I feel like that circles back to our self-worth, right?
Absolutely.
I felt like I needed to do more. I needed to do more courses to be worthy enough to be able to do the work that I was doing, and it was never enough, right?
And it
No
would
matter
never be enough.
right.
You could
Well,
be in
now
that cycle
I don't feel like
for
that anymore.
decades. I know. I see. I see.
So, well, now that that came up, let's talk about, what are the factors that like I mean, maybe not factors because that's such a loaded question, but you get someone like me that comes to you and you see my potential. You see my light, you see my worth,
Mm.
but I don't see it, right? What where do you start from there?
So it's a great question. The first place is always tuning in to tune up,
Mm,
right? So really just providing that safe space so that someone can feel that they can shut out the outside world
mm.
and they can just tap in. And tapping in is not as easy as it sounds.
No, it's not.
Tapping in is something that we avoid doing
Yeah.
for various number of reasons because we have to confront what we find there. It's so much easier to stay on the outside and look at life from what is needed from the outside, right?
Yeah.
So the
Yeah.
first place to start is always just, first of all, providing that safe space and then guiding someone gently to come into their inner self
Mm,
and having the courage to find um, to sort of confront what they find there, right?
yeah.
Because the reason why we like jump out is because we intuitively know that we're not either ready for what's going to be in there
Hmm.
or we don't have the tools, right? So it's important to surround yourself. I think one of the biggest things that I would suggest is to surround yourself with people who can see your light before you can even see your light.
Oh, I love that so much. And
Yeah.
I feel like that was such a huge part of my journey too, right? The people I surrounded myself.
Yeah.
And you can feel it. When you're with somebody, if you're even just going for a coffee and once you leave that person, how are you feeling in your
Exactly.
body when
Exactly.
you're leaving? Are you feeling good? Are you feeling light? Are you feeling, or are you feeling like heavy? You do feel it. And I feel like, I love what you said because for me, it was really hard for me
Mhm.
to tap in because then that means I have to look at all of the things that I never wanted to look at, but not just one thing, everything.
Right.
So it's really difficult to be able to look at all of that come up all at once. And it's not as pretty
Right.
as it seems,
But
right?
it doesn't all come up as all at once,
Yeah.
right? Like it comes up in chunks. It comes up, to the tolerance, your window of tolerance. Like
Hmm.
your body is so brilliantly insightful and it has so much wisdom that it knows what you can handle.
Yeah,
But we don't know that it knows. Right.
absolutely.
So we don't trust it. So we're like, oh my goodness, all of this stuff is going to come up. I have no idea how to deal with it. And so it's better just to shove it down. But it
Absolutely.
takes a lot of energy to keep it down, right? And this is what disempowers us.
Hmm.
And we're wasting our energy doing that versus rising and shining and being in our authentic self.
Yeah, and I feel like this came up in our conversation yesterday too
Mm.
about remember when we were talking about the effects of shoving things down
Right.
and how that do you want to talk a little bit about that because it was really it was a big eye opener in terms of how it manifests physically in our body.
Yeah, I remember that conversation really well. It's one of these facts of life that we don't really give a lot of credence to, but
Mm,
our body never lies.
no.
And we've just learned to ignore our body signals. And eventually you got to pay the piper.
Yeah.
Eventually it catches up on you.
Mm-hmm.
And when it does, sometimes it could be a really big thing. It could be an illness. It
Mm-hmm.
could be, you're faced with a big decision of like separating with your
Yeah.
partner or something like that. And, people come to me and they say this to me all the time. I wish I had seen the signs. And the signs were there.
Yeah.
We just have been taught not to listen to our own bodies, our own body wisdom. And that for me is one of the things I'm so passionate about in helping women retrain themselves
Yeah.
to follow that inner GPS, that inner guidance system, because it will never steer you wrong. Never.
I love that word, retrain, because I feel like if we go back and look at ourselves as how we showed up as little girls, and I see this with my daughters,
Absolutely.
right? They are
Exactly.
so fierce. They're
Right.
so confident.
Yeah.
They're so honest, and they're not worrying about how others perceive them,
At
right?
all.
And then, slowly as we start growing and we start experiencing certain things in life, parts of ourselves, pieces
Mhm.
of ourselves starts getting, pulled away from us.
Right.
And then we're here as adults trying
We
to
lose
heal.
ourselves.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. We lose ourselves and we're trying to heal all of these parts of ourselves, but we don't even realize which pieces are missing.
Right.
And that was the biggest thing for me. I felt it in my body.
Yeah.
I knew I was like at the point of a breakdown, of a burnout, but I didn't know why.
Right.
I didn't know why do I feel this way? What am I doing wrong?
Right. Because
Right?
on the outside, everything was good.
It looked
You had,
beautiful on the outside.
house,
Yeah.
children, marriage,
Yeah.
success. And there was the question, like, so why am I feeling,
Yeah.
burnt out? Why am I feeling like something's missing? Right.
Yeah, 100%. And I feel like that was one of the biggest things that when I was working with you, little by little, as we were working together, I started to feel whole again.
Right.
I had I had my husband, I had my home, I had my car, I had my children. I was able to stay home for a period of time to start building my career. What more can I need? What more can I ask for? But still felt so empty inside. And it was because of, I guess, would you say, the relationship I had with myself that was the most important relationship in my life that was missing? Like, how would you describe that?
Yeah. So my most favorite questions to ask my clients is this: is this who you are today, who you really are, or who you had to become?
Oh,
Right?
yeah. When
It's
you
a really
asked me that.
powerful question because you remember when I asked you that? Because we don't realize the layers that we put on to ourselves over the years with experiences that we go through, with different kinds of like traumas or dramas, with expectations from the outside, right? Because when we're like, you're talking about your daughter, like when she's little, you're just in your beingness.
Yeah.
You're just pure,
Yeah.
right? It's the conditioning that happens to us later that because it happens so slowly and so it's like, gaining a dress size over the year, you don't recognize it as much as if you gained it in a month.
That's right.
The contrast isn't there. So over the years, we just develop this kind of like new identity. But that is my job to help someone dismantle. And so that question, is this who you really are? And I get a lot of like pushback on it. Yeah, no, this is who I am. I'm like, really? Let's just hold this space right here for a moment. Like, let's just stay here. Is this really who you are?
Yeah.
Or is this who you had to become in order to navigate the challenges that you were faced with? Right?
And I just realized something now, since I've become aware of that and have self-awareness around that,
Right.
whenever I hear people say, oh, that's just how I am. That's just how I am.
Right.
Right? This is just how I am. And I'm thinking, is it though?
Yeah,
Is
I
it?
love it.
Or is this just who you had to become? Right? And it's kind of like people want to stay stuck there. This is just who I am.
It's
right?
familiar.
It's very familiar.
It's familiar,
Right?
and
It's safe. And
it gives us the semblance of safety,
Yeah,
right? Like our
yeah.
brain is always going to choose survival over expression.
Yeah.
Right? It's going to choose what it thinks is safe.
Can we talk a little bit more about the importance of contrast?
Okay.
We spoke a little bit about this yesterday, and you were explaining to me that, I was experiencing these, my burnout, which obviously there were so many factors involved in that. And you were saying to me about how without the contrast. I'm trying to think about exactly how you worded it.
Yeah, so what I was saying was that because you had started, you had come from a place where you were just doing life and
Yeah.
you were busy doing life, taking your kids to school, running all your errands,
Autopilot.
autopilot. And then when you started to become aware, a little bit more aware, now it's actually like your reticular activating system, but we're not going to go into
Yeah,
defining that.
that's a whole
But you
other
start
topic.
to see, you start to attract other visuals into
Yeah.
your field, right? And then you're able to see the contrast. Well, they're doing it differently than I'm doing it.
Yeah.
And it's not like there's a judgment there, but there's a discernment there that if you utilize it properly, it helps you align to who you really are and what you really desire. Because our desires we push them down, and our desires are literally like our life force.
Yeah. I feel like that happened to me on the retreat.
Exactly. It was such a
Right?
beautiful retreat. I was there for the same reason.
Yeah,
I
but
was there to recharge.
the contrast was there for me and I didn't know. And like I said, it was my first time away. So you're right. I was just doing life, raising my family, doing what my role was as a mother, a wife, a sister, a friend. And then I go to this retreat and there's all these women there
Right.
that are all there for the same reason.
Mm-hmm.
And we held space for each other with no judgment.
Right.
We filled each other up. We did all of these beautiful practices that brought this feeling like I came back home to myself. And when I went, because of that contrast, when I went back home, I knew that there was no way in hell
Right.
that I can go back to living the way that I was before.
Yeah. You reached your defining moment. That
Right.
was like I'm drawing the line in the sand right now. And you knew that part of reclaiming your wholeness was to say no to the things that you were used to saying yes to. That
Yes.
didn't really align with who you
No.
really are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Wow. Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
that just clicked too, because I knew the retreat was a transformational time for me, but I didn't realize that was my contrast. That's what showed me this is what I want to feel like, not this.
Exactly.
And then from there, I kept experiencing different things, filling myself up more to feel that again, right? And then just wanting more and more and pouring into myself more. And I can like so happily say, and there's always growth to do, right? There's always healing to do. There's always things to work on. And I know that there's still more that I can work on to show up as my highest self. But I can happily say now that without shame, without guilt, right?
I love it.
Without shame, without guilt, without betraying myself for the sake of everyone else. This is what I'm going to do. This is how I am going to love myself. And this is how I'm going to show up for myself every single day. And there is so much shame and guilt around that as a woman,
Right.
as a mother, as a friend. And it's, and that's probably one of the biggest things for me was just doing things for myself and feeling guilty about it.
Right.
And it kept me stuck.
And the judgment from others. And
Right.
What are they going to think?
Yeah.
And there
Oh,
was
what a
actually
bad
one of the
mom.
women that was there was having that. She did have a bit of a situation around that because she was posting online and people were saying to her, like, what,
Where are
you
your
left
kids? Right.
And we walked through
Oh,
that for her because
that's
it
a
was
whole
like,
other episode.
how can you show up like in a healthy way for your kids if you're not feeding yourself, if you're not resourcing yourself
Yes.
in an aligned way, right?
I love that you just said that because you just reminded me of something that happened with my son. And for me, in an episode with my sister, we were talking about the modeling that we received from our mother figures, the self-sacrificing, right? And I have two girls and a boy. And I don't want to pass on those same beliefs and those same influences to my children, right? And I love that you just mentioned that because I had an experience last week with my son. He's 7. He just turned 7. And I was sitting eating. I had just came home from a full day of private appointments. And he had asked me for something. And I said, yes, I will definitely do that for you. I'm just going to eat first. And he had said, but mommy, I want you to do it now. And the old me would have and that's okay. But I wanted him to know that it was important that I was feeding myself. And I said to him, buddy, you guys ate, mama didn't. I need to eat so that I can be healthy and fill myself up so that I can be the best mom and take care of you. And he just stood there and he looked at me and he's like, yeah, she's right. Okay, mommy, when you're done, right? And it's so small and so simple.
It's big impact.
But it's also teaching my girls that
Mm-hmm.
I need to take care of me so that I can take care of you.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And going back to that contrast topic, where I've had something similar where I always felt that I was meant to be a cycle breaker. Right.
Ooh,
I knew,
powerful.
like, how did I get into this line of work? It's like, I think from when I was really young, although I wouldn't have called it that back then.
Yeah.
But I was seeing the contrast, right? I was the only one in my family that was born in Canada.
Yeah.
So despite, what I was shown about, that women are less than men, that's what was modeled to me from the culture.
Same.
Right? And so, but because I didn't quite feel fully immersed in the old cultural, right? I had one foot in and one foot out, and that new world was drawing me, and I was able to look for contrast. I didn't ask for it, but it just sort of came to me, and then I was, wait a minute, like there's something wrong here. The way women are treated is not okay. And from a very young age, I had that like inner knowing. And so I didn't know I was going to have kids, but my daughter does not have that imprint.
Right.
My son doesn't have that imprint, right?
Yeah.
So like, again, aligning to who you're really meant to be is so impactful and so powerful, right? In ways that you just cannot even imagine.
No, you can't. You actually just reminded me of something. I remember as my young self or as a teenager, before my mom had passed, I felt that same way, that those old traditions or the old mentality or way of thinking, whatever you want to call it, it didn't sit right with me. Right? I didn't feel like called to follow along or just be obedient by it. I wanted to fight it.
Right.
And I was an activist. I was an activist for anything that I can use my voice to be an activist about. And now looking back at myself, I realized why. It wasn't just because I was so passionate about that topic.
Right.
But then after my mom passed, I feel like I lost it.
Right.
I lost that for a very, very long time. And I had to come back home to myself for what I believed in, for what I stood for what I wanted, how I envisioned my life to be, how I was so confident to just speak my voice. And then I still had my voice, but I was using it in the wrong ways.
And think about this. This is what happens. I mean, I've been doing this for like over 13 years now, and there's not one woman that comes past my energy field that has not experienced that to one degree or another. It's rampant. It's something that we all can relate to, because there's parts of ourselves that we've left behind for different reasons. And so that, going back to that question, why did I feel like something was missing when I had everything?
Yeah.
That's what was missing. It's your authentic you. It's that little girl that knew who she was and what she wanted, that got conditioned out of that. And it's just like, it's a journey back home.
And shut down by trauma.
Trauma, drama. I mean, trauma it's not the event that is the trauma. It's how we interpret the event based on our window of tolerance, right? So something really big could happen to someone that has a higher window of tolerance, and it doesn't impact them in the same way that someone who has a more sensitive nervous system, because it could be something small impacts them.
That's right.
So when we're looking at, people's experiences, it's got to be with the highest level of sensitivity, because everyone has a very different level of tolerance, right?
Yeah.
So you can't have any judgment.
Absolutely not.
In the world, there's tons of judgment, right? So how do we find that safe space where we can really tap in and say, that thing that happened to me back then still is in my nervous system and it still impacts me today.
That's right.
You need to, remove yourself from the eyes of society, let's say, because they don't necessarily understand it.
Stay tuned for part 2.